I'm making a 2D pixel art game about a cat that saves cute little animals from an evil biotech lab. During the past 6 months, my thoughts on how games are made had totally changed. I built a lot of new features with thousands of lines of code, but besides the art and programming, there were so many things I had to know about to make a medium-sized game, and I've learned them the hard way in the past 6 months. So stick around if you want to hear what I've learned. First, let me wind back to 6 months ago. I had a walking cat, some grass and trees, and some junk. I also had nice little features like scene transitioning and object fading. And then I thought, now where do I go from here?
Now what?
I was kind of lost. I needed a plan, so I thought maybe I should make an inventory system. Every game needs an inventory system, right? So after a lot of juggling with messy inputs, dragging and dropping, and some coding, I finally got an inventory system. Then again, I was back at that point, asking myself, now what do I do? I needed a plan, a better one. So unlike what a normal adult with a moderate intelligence would think, I thought it was a good idea to start making items, because every game needs items, right? So after messing around with pixel art, discovering the fascinating world of Godot custom resources, now I've got items in my game, and also these random interactable objects. And of course, you might be able to guess how I felt after that. I mean, what are these items even for? These are the most useless generic items I've ever seen. I soon come to a realization that I had no idea what I was doing. So far, I thought I was building a game. Apparently, this is not how you build a game. I was just making random features coming from a vague idea of a Stardew Valley-like game. I felt like I was missing something big and important. And that turns out to be something called a game design document. Even solo game developers need a game design document. So I dedicated 1 full month solely to design the game. Writing up the game design document was one thing, and educating myself on how to design a game was another. I learned a lot about game design, but I'll just mention one takeaway in this video. I learned that designing a game should not be based on some sort of cool idea or an awesome story as you would expect. To my surprise, the center of designing a game was actually marketing. That might not sound so right, but hear me out. The first step of making a game is to come up with a hook that attracts people to play the game, and everything else should be built around that hook. The mechanics, story, visuals, music, sound, everything. It's like a thumbnail of a YouTube video. If you want to make a viral video, you would first think of a hooky thumbnail that draws attention, and then you would produce everything else based around that thumbnail. I find it interesting that this applies to games as well. After a fair amount of thought and considering the scope of the project, I came up with the following hook. Management sim meets dungeon crawler. A management sim is where the player builds and manages a community with limited resources. A dungeon crawler, it's like a game where players explore a maze-like environment, smacking enemies and looting items. After I came up with a hook, I started writing up a document for my development team. Development team as in me and myself. I drew diagrams, came up with a rather complex stat system, and also planned out a crafting system. My brain hurt so much during this game design process, but after a dozen spreadsheets and 8 pages of a Word document, I was pretty happy because now I have a solid picture of what the game would look like. Also knew exactly which specific features I need to build. To give you some detail on the game loop, the player character would save these animals from the research facility that's full of enemies, and one by one the animals will start to live on this settlement. The animals will gather resources or craft weapons so that the player character can become stronger and progress through the game. The crafting system is designed so that the number of materials you need to build a higher level weapon would increase exponentially. This means you would need to strategically think about optimizing production. There are a few factors you need to consider. First, each animal would have its own distinct skill. For example, some of them will be in charge of construction, some of them will be doing transportation, and these little puppies will craft items in these workshops. Another factor is that each animal will have a different ability. So otters and beavers can swim and pass through water, whereas the other ones can't. Raccoons and squirrels can jump fences, but the other animals can't do that. With these considerations, you have to be smart about assigning tasks to animals and arranging the buildings and storage units. Let me know in the comments whether this sounds like a game you would want to play. Any feedback is more than welcome. Actually, in one of the comments in my last video, somebody gave me some really good feedback. It was about the title, saying that the current title, Nellum, was not as marketable as Cat RPG, which was a temporary name. That was a really good point, especially now I know that marketing is so important when you're making a game. So I came up with a title that suits the game and also sounds a little more marketable, and that would be Mlemtopia. Let me know whether you think Mlemtopia is straightforward enough for this game. Once I got all the design stuff cleared out, from then on, it was a very enjoyable process to just build the features one by one. One mistake that I made before was to work on the art and the prototype at the same time. Apparently, in the game dev world, this is a big no-no, because after building the prototype, I might discover that the game is not fun to play and would have to scrap everything. Well, if that ever happens, I'll probably curl up in my bed and cry myself to sleep. Anyway, the next topic would be game design patterns. I wanted to build a scalable project. When I'm creating an enemy, I'm not going to be creating just one. I'll be making many variants of them with different features. Same goes for other entities or objects in the game. The articles and tutorials out there, they're very helpful and well made, but they mostly focus on teaching building the basic features with a small scene, rather than focusing on teaching how you need to design your classes or how to decouple your scenes so that you can take advantage of composition, or how to avoid signal spaghetti. I won't go too deep explaining the design patterns I use because I don't want to put everybody to sleep, but I'll still talk about it anyway because I want to. For games, I think the number one design pattern would be finite state machines. If you can use just only one design pattern in a game, I would definitely pick state machines. Basically, you assign a state to an entity and tell it how to act in that specific state. And then if a certain condition is met, you make it transition to other states. For example, this little hedgehog, currently it's in idle state, and I told it to patrol when it's in idle state. Then once we assign work, so a certain condition is met, it will transition into travel state. And in travel state, if the player tells the hedgehog to go and rest, it will enter return state. But if it arrives at the work site, it will enter collection state, and so on. It can really simplify complex behaviors and prevents you from writing silly, endless if statements. Another design pattern that I'm using to manage all the signals is the events bus singleton. It means that the whole time your game is running, you have this big boss sitting in the middle, passing along all the signals coming from all the objects. I'm going for a slightly modified approach where I divide the signals into each manager, but basically it's the same idea. And lastly, my favorite, the entity component pattern. It's like making small modular features that you can use as Lego blocks to build a larger component in the game, and it's really fun to implement in Godot. I think you can really take advantage of this design pattern as long as you know how to decouple each scene. I wish I had more time to work on the game and made more progress for the past 6 months. I'm not so sure when this project will end, but I don't mind so much because I'm enjoying every moment working on it and just focusing on small goals. Right now, it has just become my morning routine that I never want to miss. Thanks so much for watching until the end. Bye.